Do you like sequels? Do you like when horror projects get a sequel and it's a bit of a toss-up as to whether or not it'll be good or not worth the time and money? My name is Walker, and this is the Recap episode, a podcast where I use social science to research, review, recap, and realize new things about reality TV, covering shows that are all-time favorites and shows that you've never heard of. In this installment of the Recap episode, I'm covering the second season of Scream Queens from VH1. This is a horror-themed reality competition show in which aspiring actresses compete for a breakout role in a horror franchise film. Specifically, for this season, Saw 3D, also known as Saw 7, also known as Saw the Final Chapter. This is the second season and final season for this franchise. The first season came out in 2008. It was the focus of the last episode of the pod. This season aired in 2010. Both of them were connected to the Saw franchise. It's the only franchise, horror franchise, to have media like this associated with it. You would think that would be a thing studios would want to capitalize on. But it's never been done again, which is kind of surprising to me. Although maybe part of that has to do with the fact that we don't really have these giant horror franchises anymore. So season 1 saw a lot of success, clearly enough to grant a second season. It's how you get extra seasons in the reality TV world. You have to draw the numbers, draw enough interest, and show that it can be profitable, essentially. And season 1 did a good job. Season 1 is entertaining to me. Go listen to my episode. Interestingly, I couldn't find a lot of history on season 1 and a lot of its production background, even though I had interviews with the winner and interviews with James Gunn, who had played a major role in that season of the show. I couldn't really find a lot about how the show was made, the history, the production. I kind of just had James Gunn's reflections in his blog to go off of, and a lot of those were just kind of oh, today was great. I thought this actress did a great job, or not, as well as some pot shots at VH1. But interestingly, for this season, I was able to find out a lot more. There were weekly blog posts on the production company's website, as well as multiple interviews done online. Specifically, I'd love to shout out actionflickchick.com. Katrina from that website did a lot of interviews. She liked to go on set. She interviewed the celebrity director, part of the show. She interviewed the winner. She got to interview the heads of the production company. A lot of good information came out of those interviews. And you can still read all of the transcripts of her interviews on actionflickchick.com. Our second season aired on VH1 again. This second season of Scream Queens aired on VH1 from August 2nd to September 27th, 2010. As I mentioned previously, this was associated with Lionsgate, Twisted Pictures, and the Saw franchise. The winner would get a breakout role in Saw 3D. Saw 3D itself came out only a month later, on October 29th, 2010. I mentioned this in the last episode, but we used to have October was not only Halloween month, but horror movie month. For the longest time, October was all every October we got a new Saw film. I think it kind of stopped after 3D, because then we had some weird things going on lore-wise in the franchise. Thanks to some interviews with the winner of this season, I was actually able to find out that the entire show was filmed in 2009. All of the stuff was done in 2009, the previous year, which that makes sense. A lot of these reality TV timelines, it takes a while to put these things together. Even if they film the show over the process of 3 or 4 weeks, as they did with this one, editing and making sure everything is handled and finalized and whatnot can take a very long time. And then all the pre-work of auditions, casting, any kind of training or anything you want your cast members and crew to go through, you got to handle all that. So I found out that auditions started August 2009 and proceeded all the way through November. And then basically immediately after auditions were done, the very last ones, they were at some hotel with all the final women who received a callback to be on the show. And then they finally narrowed it down to their final 10. The entire show was filmed starting just before Thanksgiving and ended just before Christmas in 2009. But then, of course, again, the show did not air until August 2010. So there was quite a bit of waiting period. The number here gets thrown around quite a bit, and like changed. Somewhere between 30,000 and 36,000 women auditioned to be on the show. Of course, they only selected 10, but the contestants love to tell you that, like, out of 30,000 women, I'm here. And they should be, proud of that fact. Getting on one of these shows is not exactly easy, especially one that's looking to find undiscovered talent. There were some interviews with the heads of the production company, talked about what are their criteria for being cast. They said they have to be a good actor, have to have a good look for the part, need some raw talent, some kind of experience. There has to be potential for the role, but also room for growth. You have to be willing to be vulnerable on camera, play to the reality TV aspect of the experience. I do want to briefly mention that I did completely mispronounce the production company last time. I learned a lot more about them while preparing for this episode. So the production company is Yoke and Biagio. Turns out they are not only the production company for this show and for quite a few TV media things, such as Beauty and the Geek. They're also wife and husband. I didn't know this until recently, which is very, very cool. And I totally mispronounced Yoke's name in my first episode, so my apologies. I did find out, it's kind of questionable sometimes. You're like, oh, that show got a season 2, or, a season 3 sometimes, and you're kind of like, interesting. I didn't think there was that much interest in that show. I didn't really hear people talk about it. In one of the interviews, Biagio stated, one reason that he thinks they're the only acting competition show at the time to get a second season is because they have such a big prize at the end. A lot of the others may just be like, oh, you'll get an agent, you'll get, attached to this production company or whatever. But this one had specifically, you're going to be cast in this specific, big franchise movie. Again, season 1 saw 6, season 2 saw 7. We're on the 6th and 7th movies in the series, and as one of the series' biggest fans, I'll let you know that the franchise was not dying by any means at this point. There were some weird things going on, but the movies were still very enjoyable. It was the next movie that got a little weird. And some lessons learned about season 1 directly from Yoke and Biagio again. The big ones they learned is to rely on their actresses a lot more, give them plenty of opportunities to act on a real set. That's one thing I noted we saw between season 1 and this season, was a lot of the, what they call director's challenge, where the contestants to act in a scene, and that's what they're judged on. The scenes they act in and the sets they're using were a lot more involved, had a bigger crew, had more blocking, prop work, transitions. They were doing multiple scene or multiple angles and pieces to construct one scene, rather than doing these smaller, one shot, one take scenes, and the sets had they were a lot more involved as well, which was good for the contestants. Give them experience. If they're going to become actresses, let's give them experience to actually act on a real set. Yoke and Biagio also mentioned that they were, very excited to work with this particular set of contestants because it seemed like compared to season 1, these actresses were a lot more open to way more ambitious challenges and scenes, which I think is why we got a little Fear Factory this season compared to season 1. I'll mention that later. So in season 1, we had 3 judges. We get to have 3 judges again, but only one of the judges / mentors carried over from season 1 to season 2, that being John Homa, the tough love, paternal acting coach. Season 1 had Scream Queen herself from the first 3 Saw films, Shawnee Smith. She was replaced for this season with Jamie King of My Bloody Valentine and The Tripper, and also Pearl Harbor, I guess. Jamie King's wonderful. This is her second appearance on this podcast in a show, the first one being a guest judge spot for Halloween Wars. And then our celebrity director, as the title of the show gives them. In season 1, it was James Gunn, now well known for making good superhero movies, but back then was known for things like Slither and the Scooby-Doo screenplays. He's replaced with Tim Sullivan, the director of Driftwood and 2001 Maniacs and its sequel, Field of Screams. We again had 10 contestants in no particular order. I'll run through them. So we have Carly Lewis, 29 years old, from New York City, Sierra Holmes, 22, from Suffern, New York, Sarah Alami, 26, from Chicago, Christine Haberman, 28, from Porterville, California, Ty Davis, 26, from Chicago, Jessica Ortiz, 24, from the Bronx, Allison Kyler, 26, from Hickory, North Carolina, Rosanna Pansino, 24, from Seattle, Lana Underwood, 28, from Santa Monica, and Gabby West, 24, from Santa Fe, New Mexico. 10 girls between the 20s and 30s. This is the same demographic that was in season 1. I'm sure the casting call for season 2, although I couldn't explicitly find the actual casting call. You can go to Yoke and Biacho's website and see the old blog posts. They did one like between the 2 seasons about like, well, here's the link to audition for season 2. The links are dead, unfortunately. I didn't check the Wayback Machine, but the Wayback Machine didn't seem to have a lot of recorded web pages from this production company's website, especially since the company's like still active. Each of our episodes follows the same format as we had in season 1, which is nice. So there's usually 3, quote, challenges per episode. They start with a skills test, which is usually administered by Jamie King and judged directly by her, as far as we can tell. If there was any production kind of in her ear saying like, hey, you should let this person win, hard to tell. No one ever said anything like that was afoot. But it seems like Jamie was the actual judge and mentor for these skills tests. Usually here, Jamie is asking them to demonstrate some kind of skill relevant to being an actress or being a, quote, scream queen. The second pseudo-challenge, it's set up as like an event in the episode, that's probably a better word for it, is acting class with John Homa. John Homa, again, has said he's like the tough love, very paternal acting coach. He's the kind to push you, but then be really proud of you. And even though you feel kind of like destroyed when you leave his class, you learned something. Some of the things that he does are like the classes and the way he like delivers his lessons seem a little questionable. James Gunn in season 1 mentioned that he thought some of those acting classes were devised by producers at VH1 to purposefully be weird. This season, it seems like we get a lot more of Homa's acting classes having like a direct, clear lesson, but also the contestants, it seems a lot more tell us in their confessionals, like, this is what I learned from John today. This is what I did in acting class, and it's going to help me be a better actress because of this. So I don't know if that was like VH1 kind of reflecting on what they did for season 1 and being like, wow, we kind of made this whole event seem like nothing, especially after the 6th episode acting class in season 1 that just fell apart. They probably wanted to make that segment a bit more concrete. The last event or challenge in the episode is what we call the Director's Challenge. This is with Tim. The contestants receive a script they have to learn, and then they go and shoot a scene by themselves with some kind of co-star or particularly weird prop or element, or all together in the case of shooting a fake trailer at one point. The big thing here is that Tim will give them notes on their acting, and the challenge is to successfully, take in those notes and adapt and change your acting, and also just do well in the scene in general. So each event, they get time with each one of the mentors and the judges. Between these events, all the actresses, all the contestants live together in a big mansion. It does look like it's the same mansion from season 1, but it's been very much upgraded. The budget increased for this season over season 1. If you watch the 2, which you can watch on Amazon Prime and elsewhere, you'll definitely tell it's like, oh, they got money now. Or at least they put the money into the house. The contestants live together, and so we get interstitial, like between events, I call it the in-betweens of any drama, or them just like hanging out at the house. This is also how they transition between events. Usually Jamie, after the skills test, will say like, see you later. They may just cut directly to acting class, or they may have some of the contestants talk about how they feel about that point in the week in the competition. Acting class, at the end, he usually says, John tells them like, well, good luck on your director's challenge. Between acting class and the director's challenge, usually what happens is we get a fun little skit. I call it a skit because you can tell it's totally, if not fully rehearsed, it is at least partially rehearsed, because they definitely, I think, would tell the contestants to play up their reactions to some of what these happen. they have like a horror element to delivering the scripts or the information about the director's challenge. So the one that I can immediately think of off the top of my head is like a sexy Dracula showed up at one point and was like yelling at all the contestants, but he was just there to like deliver scripts to them. Or one time they got a gift box, like a present that had like blood pouring out of it. And it was shaking and stuff and making noise. And they're like, ooh, what's going to happen? And they open it and just had a phone inside of it with a text message that said, "The deadliest killers are silent." Ooh. And then like a mime appeared to deliver the message for their next challenge. So it's campy and fun. They have fun with that piece. And then of course they go to the director's challenge. The final piece of each episode is judging. Judging here is kind of interesting because in most, reality competition shows, you have everyone together for the judging. Even if they're just safe, they may just receive the like, okay, you're safe, while the people who are at the top and the bottom receive like actual critique and praise and more time because they're more interesting in that moment. Here what they do instead is for the first half of the season, they often only bring in the tops and bottoms to judging. Anyone who's safe just kind of gets left to hang out in the house and wait. And they don't know the ones that are brought in to summoned to judging. They don't know like who's going to be the top, who's going to be the bottom. And then they'll select who the winner is, which is what they call the leading lady. And then they'll select who's eliminated or axed from the competition. Partway through the season, and they did this in season 1 as well, they change it up where they start bringing everyone in because they've gotten down to a lower amount of contestants. Or sometimes they'll only bring the bottoms in, and they'll just deliver the winner for the week, like in the message of who gets summoned to judgment. Kind of unceremonious, but, it's certainly a way to do things. And I guess delivering the winner through a message saves time in production for when it comes to judging. It gives them more like space to be able to just do the critiques for the bottoms, especially when there's a week where there's like 4 bottoms and they have to get through quite a few people. That's every episode. As I did when I covered season 1, I'm going to quickly go through all of the events and the challenges real quick, provide some commentary for any that I think need it, and then I'll get into a bigger recap of all of our contestants and their journeys on this show. So our very first skills test, which is also when like the contestants are introduced to us and they enter for the first time and they're introduced to the judges and Jamie explains how things work, and the prize and whatnot. While this is going on, suddenly Freddy Krueger falls in from the ceiling of the room they're in the mansion. You may be shocked. You're like, wow, they destroyed a mansion. Probably fake skylight, but also they like destroyed a wall in season 1. When like a homicidal maniac came through for the first skills test. But their test is to lie in a bed, then they must wake up from a nightmare and then realistically react to an attack from whichever PA is playing Freddy Krueger here. Their acting class for this episode is to learn how to channel rage in acting. John's classes also always have like 2 phases. There's the first part where he just asks them to do the thing that they're going to hopefully be able to do by the end of the class, and then we show everyone failing, so you could be like, wow, you all suck, here's how you should actually do it, and then he does some kind of demonstration, or he actually does actual teaching as well. In this case, he like asks them all to yell at him and scream and deliver some lines with rage, and he's like, no, bad, horrible. And he's holding a bat the whole time when he does this, and then in like the second half of this class, he rips down a curtain, reveals a bunch of pumpkins and gourds, and he goes over and starts screaming and smashing them. And he's like, that's rage. So then all the contestants do the same. The director's challenge for episode 1 is for each of the girls to produce sort of a trailer for a movie in which a sorority girl dates a man who is actually the devil, and Tim is looking for them to deliver sexy, scared, and rage against this devil character in the 3 short little mini scenes that get stitched together for this entire thing. Episode 2, our skills test is for the contestants to get creative, but also not too crazy. They need to create a witch character who is vengeful, and then portray her casting a revenge spell on someone. They get to make their character, they get to choose their own like lines and scripts, they get full creativity with this, but they need to make it believable and entertaining and engaging and not too weird. The acting class for episode 2 is John is trying to teach them how to channel their emotions through simple words so that they can learn to convey emotion, motivation, intention with just words and actually, deliver characterization when you're speaking, not just delivering a script. The director's challenge here, they're supposed to play a murderous girlfriend who starts friendly and then has a switch and moves to killing her boyfriend. And it's implied eats him, but they don't actually do that in the scene. Episode 3, I thought the skills test was very interesting, and it didn't really come up anywhere else. They also never did this for season 1. They did motion capture for the skills test. They had to put on a mocap suit and capture a puppet coming to life for the first time and then jump out a window. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know how much motion capture is used in horror, but that's a very good yes, we're prepping you for the Saw franchise and to be a horror actress, but this will actually help you in other acting endeavors as well, which I thought was pretty cool. John's acting class in episode 3 is all about crying on demand, which he teaches them you don't just have to force tears out, you should access, emotions that make you cry naturally, but be able to access those emotions quickly and well and efficiently. And then the director's challenge here is a scene of their character discovering a ransacked home. They find a corpse of their friend, and they have to react to the monster that killed their friend. They only get one word for the whole scene. They can only say the word no, but they get to say it in different ways. That's part of the challenge. And in this episode, they also have to act with maggots being thrown all over them. The creature that killed the friend is some giant worm monster. Episode 4, our skills test, is a sexy Scream Queen photo shoot with Scream Queen icon Debbie Rochon, who is also the head of Fangoria magazine. The acting class in episode 4 is Seduction and Subtlety. This was the first acting class in season 1. It is notable for being very weird in season 1. He had them sexily eat fruit and then yelled at them all when they did it wrong. In this one, instead, he has them seductively make a margarita. And again, he's trying to teach them that you don't go over the top to be a sexy, seductive actress in character. You have to just be subtle. And then the director's challenge in episode 4 is they play a stripper erotic dancer at some VIP club holding Bruce the Python, which I believe is the one that Britney Spears danced with that one time. And they have to transition into a killer moment throughout the scene. Episode 5 is the camp week. I really like that they, address and cover campy horror in this show. So the first challenge is to play a zombie emerging from a grave, searching for food, and then the zombie gets shot and they must fall over and die again, realistically. The big thing here is they had squibs on their body to do the bloodshot from being shot, and they were actual explosive special effects. Acting class for episode 5 was actually all about comedy. Joe Wengert from the Upright Citizens Brigade. Their whole thing here was learning how to take something like a weird setup, but the comedy you can build into it is reacting normally to a weird setup. So, for example, a world where there's monsters and supernatural entities, but everything just sort of behaves as if it was still our world. I think one of the examples is Frankenstein getting a parking ticket, And then the challenge for them is to not go weird and bizarre with it, but just react as you would normally. That's where the comedy lies, is the subversion. And then the director's challenge for episode 5 is to film a trailer all together, where they are vampire outlaws. There's a Wild West town, and it's run by a clan of vampires, but then 2 of them are rival new vampires in town come and take over. In episode 6, our skills test is to act with a green screen in a scene in which they react to things they cannot see, of course. They're in front of the green screen, and they have to react, quote, realistically, to seeing a giant monster come into their city and convey proper terror. The acting class for that week is to work with props of fake tools and weapons. John has them pick up and get used to the weight and the heft of a real object, and then using a prop of that real object, practice moving it, and then practice scenes where they do stage combat and hit each other with the prop, focusing on making it look real and focus on reacting to it in a realistic way. And then the director's challenge for that week is they're doing a scene of a ghostly attack where they have to try to really convey that they are being attacked by some invisible force. They also get some experience here acting on wires as they're like yanked across the set as the ghost, pushes them. Episode 7, this is what they call Altered States Week, where they learn about becoming something different in terms of like horror characters. So the skills test is ghost possession. They do like a seance scene, and Jamie wants to see them contact the spirit, be taken over, act as the spirit, and then show the spirit like leaving their body. For the acting class, John teaches them the in and outs of portraying drunkenness properly, which he says, as a female character in a horror movie, there's a high chance that you may be playing a drunk character in a horror movie quite often, but you can't get drunk to do that. So you gotta learn how to act it. He actually gives like specific tips, like in this class, and also like the previous one as well with the props, so, like how to like change the shape of your mouth to sound more drunk, how to like get the focus and the eyes and everything right. And how to do it without like going too comedic. It's a really good example of like actually teaching. And then the director's challenge for episode 7, they must play a psycho character in an asylum, interacting with a doctor, very Silence of the Lambs. Episode 8 is our final episode. As with season 1, the first challenge episode 8 is what they call the Scream Queen Gauntlet. It's one long, continuous, elaborately blocked and set up and staged shot, usually with combat and working with one scene partner that they have to complete. And the gauntlet is used to eliminate a top 3 immediately down into a top 2, which then the top 2 end up going to the final acting class, which in season 1 was kind of a one-on-one. This time John has them practice and rehearse the scene they'll be doing in the director's challenge, because there's a character they react to in that scene, so he has them take turns, one person be the main, one person be the other character, and they alternate. And then the final director's challenge, as of season 1, they recreated or they homaged a scene from one of the Saw films. In this season, they did an homage to the very original Saw, where Cary Elwes' character gets a call from his daughter while he's chained up in the famous Saw bathroom and threatens Jigsaw. So our wonderful cast, I know I went through them in kind of a random order earlier, but for the rest of the recap, I'm going to go through them in mostly elimination early order until we get up to the top 3. And then I'll go through episode 8 at the end, and then finally reveal who the winner was. If you want to go watch the season now, this is a great time to pause the podcast and go watch almost 8 hours of a TV show. and then come back to the podcast. So, Lana Underwood in episode 1, she is kind of characterized as just kind of being here. The first thing we learn about her is that her dad is a Hollywood director. At the time, having worked on Tremors and Face Slickers. And that's kind of it for her. Her screams in the skills test with Freddy sound a lot like laughing. During the first acting class with the Rage, John not only cuts her really early in the first part of the class, when he's kind of testing them, but she also just doesn't perform well in the pumpkin exercise, and other of the contestants say that her rage just seemed more like a temper tantrum. In the director's challenge, she just can't really deliver enough like fear in the scene, and Tim says she's not really like delivering the lines as a character, she's just kind of saying them. Again, I'm going in elimination earlier, so as you can expect, she's summoned for judgment in episode 1. She's in the bottom 2. After this one episode, Tim says there's not enough scene yet in her. He can't peel the layers away. She tries to answer back that she's like, well, I've studied acting, and she tells us in the episode, she's like, well, my dad isn't a director. She tells us again, and she says, my experience usually is just like being on a set for like the production side. I'm not super used to being the talent, and Tim says, while she studies a bunch, that's cool. But John cuts in. He's like, well, it's not about that. It's not how much you've, like, studied. It's actually just, it's about how much you've actually learned and can show. And Jamie thinks that she's not quite presenting what she fully could be to the world. But she is, of course, axed in that first episode. You know, all these shows have to have someone that goes home first. So you might as well pick someone that you know can at least be entertaining. She was fun to watch. She wasn't boring by any means. But she definitely was not anywhere near the talent level of most of the rest of this cast. Our next contestant is Rosanna Pansino. Some of you may recognize that name as I say it, and I will explain why later. Very funny. Her first, I'm Rosanna. She actually goes by Ro, so I may call her that in the show during this recap. When she introduces herself, she's like, I'm the same height as Mother Teresa. That's her, housewives line. She tells us that before the show, she had worked as a church secretary during the day and a go-go dancer at night. Very interesting choice to, leave that in as, one of her introductory first impression characterizing moments. Kind of tells you a lot about her and the struggles she's going to have. She gets characterized as not being able to access, fear and scary and evil enough. And that is her downfall. And they definitely set that up in the beginning by being like, I work at a church. I'm as tall as... Oh, let me think of someone else short. Oh, Mother Teresa. Although little did she know the evil that was lurking there. During the first episode, she does okay in the skills test. She freezes up during the acting class, so John cuts her completely. And during the pumpkin smashing exercise, she actually picked a pumpkin too big, and she just couldn't even break it because she's very small. Played for comedy, but also just kind of oh, unfortunate. And again, her early characterization in episode 1 is really just as someone who's too nice and too gentle for the horror genre. In episode 2, she starts to become a main narrator for the episode, a trick they use in reality competitions to kind of tell the audience who they should be paying attention to this episode, is to give them more confessional and narration time. So Rosanna gets a lot of that in episode 2. In the episode 2 skills test, she kind of freezes again, which is not great. And then in the episode 2 acting class, where she's supposed to deliver evil killer intent to John, and it's directly at John for the exercise. She just legitimately can't, and she completely froze up again. I found a part of the interviews with the production that at this point was one of the ones that, the production team was literally yelling at her, behind the scenes. They're like, please say something, anything. And she just legitimately froze completely, gave nothing. In a confessional, she tells us that she she can't feel evil. She can't access that for her acting. And during the acting class, John's like, I'm going to send you home. He threatens with it. The director's challenge... she tells us, evil is so hard because she doesn't have any experiences to pull from. This is the one where they play the girlfriend that suddenly switches from being nice to killing the boyfriend. She tells us during the director's challenge, she's like, oh, I'll go Stepford Wife. That's a good subtle evil, but it's not good. Tim he liked the initial characterization for her, evil girlfriend character as this cute and bubbly personality with the intent to kill, but it just wasn't enough. Some of the other contestants say the same thing in their confessionals, talking about her performance, saying that she was distracted and overwhelmed. Of course, she is summoned for judgment. She is placed in the bottom 2. The judges tell her they were waiting for something, and it really never happened. John is still very upset and frustrated that she just completely froze up on him. And the judges ask her if she can get to the place they want her to, and she just says, I'll do it, but then she is axed. On the way out, she says, evil was just too evil for her. But she knows her mistakes, and she's not going to make them again. And I'll say, she has an incredible career now, where she doesn't have to be evil at all. Third contestant here, Carly Lewis. She tells us in the first episode that she has booked commercials before, but in LA, she's been struggling for work. And she's really hoping that this show can make her a star. And that's really much her entire piece in episode 1. In the first half of the season, especially in the director's challenges and the acting class, they will tend to just skip over really quickly any of the contestants that do okay, kind of the middle of the pack. rather than showing the whole, like, their whole participation in the acting class and John interacting with them and other contestants giving their opinion during confessionals, or not showing their whole experience doing the scene with Tim. They'll just kind of show a snippet of them doing it and move on. So sometimes I legitimately just don't have anything really for them in that episode that's remarkable, other than just like, they made a comment and we got to see them do a good job. In episode 2, in the director's challenge, this is where she starts standing out. She wants to be different. She knows she needs to make an impact. So in the scene with the killer girlfriend, one of the things they're doing is chopping up like a raw steak. And so to be different, she like eats one of the little sinewy bits and like licks the knife after the killing of the boyfriend in the scene. She tells us she really wanted to do something no one else would do, and no one else did that. So props to her for that. By the time we get to episode 3, her storyline is a lot about her being insecure, about her need to stand out. In acting class, she struggles to cry on demand, and she's annoyed about this. As we see back at the house between acting class and the director's challenge, she's frustrated that she's giving it her all, but it's just not enough. She comes across and tells us she's very nervous for the scene. She really wants to tell Tim and convey that she's here, she is a good actor. However, during the actual director's challenge and the scene itself, Tim cuts her and tells her that she's just really bland, and it's unbelievable how she's reacting to things. One of the contestants in confessional says that her entire acting performance in that episode just seems fake and unnatural, so she ends up overacting to everything. She is, of course, then summoned to judgment, placed on the bottom. Tim says that she comes across so desperate to stand out that she's just making crazy choices. Jamie here, offers some empathy. She says that, hey, when I was an early actress, I did the exact same thing, but it's because I didn't trust myself. And that's what Jamie wants her to do. And John, interestingly, says she, works way too hard. All this together just makes her, at that moment in time, the weakest, so they send her home. Allison Kyler is up next. In episode 1, we learn that she's a professional dancer. She has acted, and her most well-known job so far is being an iPod girl. If you remember, because you're old like me, the early iPod commercials where they had people dancing as silhouettes with the iPod earbuds plugged in and everything. I actually dressed up as that for Halloween one year at school. She was one of those, which, she jokes, she's like, yeah, I got to be that, but you can't exactly see my face. I'm just a silhouette, a shadow. Similar to Carly, that's really all we got for the first episode for her. She does give good narration, so it was good to see her when she would come up and make comments on the other contestants. Case in point, episode 2, she's a big narrator in this episode. She's telling us a lot about the 2 contestants that are performing the worst in that episode. She goes first in the director's challenge for episode 2, but Tim gives her some notes saying that she struggled with the pacing of the emotional buildup of the scene. She started the character where she should be ending the scene. One of the killing the boyfriend, the murderous girlfriend. He gives her some notes, be friendly at first, but then reveal the evil, and she does a really good job of taking these notes and adapting her acting to them. Episode 3, with the motion capture, she gets very confident in her acting for this because she says she's a dancer. However, she makes some weird creative choices that, while they were inventive and creative and cool, Jamie said that those choices were bold but not believable for the character they were portraying. They were supposed to be playing this puppet that came to life and was curious about the world, and Allison was doing cartwheels. Which, if it was a happy moment, sure, but this is, supposed to be a horror, spooky, creepy moment. Allison does okay in the episode 4 acting class for the crying on demand. John tries to give her a scene where she's supposed to do, tears of joy, reacting to, a baby, her baby just being born. But this is contrasted with a bunch of her confessionals. She's like, I don't want kids. I don't like kids. She's like, me having a baby? That's terrifying. So she's like, he wants me to go for happy tears. I'm going for scared tears. Which was pretty funny, honestly. The episode 4 acting director's challenge is the one where they have to act with maggots, literally thrown on them in the scene. Allison is one of the ones who tells us that she hates bugs, does not want to work with them. But she knows that if she can step it up in the director's challenge, she could earn leading lady. especially since so far in the week she's done okay, but not the things that the judges and mentors specifically want. Interestingly, we do get some narration of her acting choices over her performance during the Director's Challenge. The show likes to use this when they do want to, convey that these actresses are mature, intellectual, good at their craft, and they want us to have more time with them in that episode, again, because they're a focal point. Tim does direct her to think more realistically about her actions when she's portraying a specific character. In the episode 3 scene, they discover the corpse of their dead friend, and in her first take at the scene, she goes and pours herself over the corpse, because that's just a prop, right? Even with the maggots on it. He's like, hey, if you just saw your best friend's dead body, would you be touching it, hugging it? Think a little bit about how your character should realistically react here. But she takes the notes really, really well, and she ends up doing a really good job reacting and acting with the actual live maggots. So she is summoned for judgment in episode 3, but she earns a spot in the top 2. In that episode, Tim says she looks both beautiful and terrified during the challenge, but Jamie really wants her to be open to more constructive criticism, and specifically to soften her expression. When Jamie gave the feedback during the skills test in that episode about not portraying this little puppet character correctly within the context of the scene, her kind of neutral reaction is this wide-eyed, kind of downturned mouth expression that makes it look like she's offended to be receiving critique. In episode 4, Allison tells us she's super excited for all the sexy challenges, but then in the photo shoot with Debbie Rochon, she's given the mom character, the mom of the killer or something. She's very unhappy about giving an unsexy mom character and an unsexy, a turtleneck. During the shoot, though, Jamie mentions about her outfit when she comes up. The contrast, right? They're going to be the actress is complaining, but then someone else is going to be oh, we really like the outfit. Jamie states that she likes the sexy Mia Farrow look. It's very Rosemary's Baby. Yes, I know Mia Farrow is in Rosemary's Baby. I watched America's Next Top Model. One of my main points about season 1 of this show is that it's horror movie America's Next Top Model. If you've watched Next Top Model, you know that for 2 or 3 cycles in a row, for the makeovers, Tyra was obsessed with making one of her girls chop off all their hair so that she could look like Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby. This show obviously pulled inspiration from Next Top Model. This had to have been in there as a reference to that. Whether or not Jamie said it spontaneously or if she was directed to, 100% I feel like that was left in as a reference to Tyra's obsession with Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby. But anyway, during the photo shoot itself, everyone is making these shocked faces at her attempts with the photos, and she's struggling to just rely on her natural sex appeal. During the subtle seduction acting class, John really wasn't happy with her face and her expressions again. Tells her she needs to relax her face. She does finally get there, but that's the through line problem for her. Allison tells us for the Director's Challenge, the stripper one with the giant snake, she says it's really easy for her to get into character when she's wearing these sexy revealing outfits. Cool. But she also keeps giving these weird, again, these wide eyes in the scene. She messes up some of the lines. She also is not taking Tim's notes well. We're on the downward trend for Allison. She is summoned to judgment. She gets annoyed a bit that she's summoned for judgment. She's like, I'm doing well. Why am I getting judged? Which is never a good sign for a contestant here. She's placed in the bottom 2. Jamie critiques her, saying that watching her body movements was great in the sexy, seductive snake lady scene, but her dialogue and her facial movement was completely distracting. Allison says she knows she can change it, but she is axed in episode 4. The next contestant is Sarah Alami. She is from Chicago, has a strong accent. That is one of her things that she has to overcome throughout the show. She also has to overcome her anxiety throughout the show. She is also a mom. And now you've learned everything about Sarah that the show wants to tell you. She's been acting for a while. In the first episode, she tells us that she had a daughter at 19. She loves her daughter, of course. And that is again, one of her 3 big character points. She does, pretty okay. I just don't have much of her for episode 1, because she's, again, kind of skipped past, not focused on. Episode 2, she made some choices and this is where they really start characterizing her, like in the witches challenge where they have to create a witch character. She's like, oh, I'm gonna dress up as like kind of princessy because it reminds me of my daughter, which is very sweet, but the show is characterizing her in a very specific way. This is when her accent starts to become a problem in the acting class. Some of the other contestants say, like, when she's trying to do the evil characterization here, she doesn't come across as evil, she just comes across as Chicago. In the director's challenge for episode 2, the killer girlfriend, the first note is that she comes across one note, and only, like, there's not enough dynamics, and there's no sense of menace in the character. And he says, we need more transition of the character through the scene. And she tells us, she goes, I think being sexy is a lot easier than being evil. She struggles with it, but she does get there. She is summoned for judgment, however, in the second episode. Interestingly, like, before they actually go to judgment and we're getting the contestants reacting to being summoned, she tells us she's anxious about it. And we get a shot of her, like, zipping up her suitcase. The contestants in this season, when they go to judgment, they are dressed up much nicer than the contestants in season 1 were when they go to judgment. I'm sure that was a request/demand from the production company to be able to sell the professionalism of the show a little bit more. But you can never tell if, when they're getting ready for judgment, if they're zipping up their suitcases because they've just got like an outfit out of there, or if they're zipping it up because they think they're going home. I think later in the season there's definitely a moment where one of the characters is putting together their suitcase because they think they're about to be eliminated and have to leave. During this episode 2 judgment, Jamie says that Sarah looks like a movie star, but her accent is way too strong. Tim tells her that her performance was not deep enough. And John also said she looks like a star, but she needs to work on her acting. She is left as safe in episode 2. In episode 3, Sarah's big thing to overcome this week, again, is the accent. She goes second in the acting test, and then in between the acting test, the skills test, and class, this is when Sarah opens up to the other people in the house, as well as the audience, about her anxiety disorder and how she has to deal with it. Sarah is absolutely terrified of acting with the maggots in this episode for the director's challenge. She's, they build up a lot of drama and tension here because she's like, I'm not going to do the challenge. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get that out there, and I'm not going to be able to, do the part with the maggots. I can do everything else, but I won't do the maggots. She goes after Jessica, who, and they get to, like, watch each other do the director's scenes, which is very interesting, and kind of react to them. Really good for building tension and getting good confessional lines and reactions from the other contestants for the show. She goes to Jessica, who accidentally ends up with a lot of the maggots in her mouth and, like, in her clothes, which freaks out Sarah completely. She's super overwhelmed. She's really struggling due to being, like, way too into her head, thinking of the maggots for the first part of the challenge, to the point where she's, like, moving too quickly through the scene, and they have to, like, move on from the first to the final shot without necessarily getting what Tim wanted. However, she does completely make it through. She does the maggot pour. She pushes through and all that. She is summoned to judgment. She's placed in the bottom. Tim recognizes her fear, and he's proud that she powered through it, but it was still a very bad acting experience for her overall. And Jamie tells her that in that director's challenge, she just couldn't find anywhere in the scene where she shined at all. But she's ultimately saved for that episode. In episode 4, with the photo shoot with Debbie for the sexy photo shoot, she's supposed to play like a serial killer character. So they've got her with like an axe and some blood on her. She does what you're supposed to do in a photo shoot like this, where all of her poses are like, all of her photos are taken while she's like mid-movement. So she looks very like ethereal and sexy as this like serial killer character, and it gets her the win for that skills test, which at this point in the competition not only grants her immunity from being eliminated, but there was a special extra prize that she actually ended up with a spread in Fangoria magazine. So during the acting class, she goes really bold during the subtle seduction at the first attempt, where he just has them like, show me how to be sexy, and she goes to like interact with John himself while making the little margarita, which he's like, this is cheating, And it kind of like gives you a moment of like, oh, did she do it right? Like, no, John is like, you're a little over the top. And Sarah shares that it was like really cool to learn that the key to being sexy and seductive is being subtle. That's one of those moments where I'm like, this season they really let the contestants tell you what they learned in class. I think they really wanted to give John some credibility, or maybe he demanded it. The director's challenge, she did all right. She was one of the ones that was kind of just moved past quickly for the one with the snake. In episode 5, Campy Week, for the zombie skills test, she goes, they get to choose like what kind of zombie they want to be. Jamie gives examples, of a scary zombie like 28 Days Later, a campy zombie like Dawn of the Dead, or an even campier comedic zombie such as Zombieland. She goes for like what she quote her Wayne's World rocker dead guy. So she like emerges from her little crypt and she's like rocking out. Interesting choices. Jamie was making a face at her performance the whole time. Another contestant, Christine, says that this direction, just doesn't work at all. Sarah in this episode, again, this is her last episode, so they're going to give her a lot more screen time and find ways to preempt and characterize her downfall. Her struggle this episode is being away from her daughter. While she has mentioned her daughter in previous episodes, this is where they really laid it on thick. She's like distracted, she can't focus, she's crying because she misses her daughter. It's very heartfelt, but you can tell why they're putting all this in the episode. She struggles in the acting class to actually play the character that she's given for the comedy, with the guy from Upright Citizens Brigade. And in the trailer, she's supposed to play one of the outlaws that comes to the vampire town to take over, but she struggles a lot with a scene where she's supposed to be like force dunked into a water trough. Her anxiety gets to her and she has to kind of like cut the scene and have them move on without really completing that scene as intended. She's summoned for judgment. She's placed on the bottom. Tim tells her that she's growing, but perhaps not quick enough. Jamie was really frustrated with her skills test performance because her choice took over the scene rather than letting the scene actually play out properly. And John thinks that she's really limiting herself. She gets axed, and then her, remarks as she's heading out is just, again, all about her daughter. And she's excited to see her when you go, which, kind of shows that she was thinking more about that than the competition. Halfway through, our next contestant is Sierra. She tells us in episode 1 that she's been acting since she was little. Horror is her favorite genre. She goes second for the skills test, reacting to Freddy attacking her. A lot of the others say that her performance was more adult movie than horror movie, which is something she's going to struggle with throughout the show, is this kind of like going a bit too far in one direction. That's not good. During the rage test, she's one of the first ones to be cut really early, but then she does well with the pumpkin smashing to access the rage that way. She has some weird pacing in the first director's challenge, and some trouble with her blocking, line delivery, and her eye line. When the first round of contestants is summoned for judgment, she kind of like breaks down a bit and cries, thinking that she's completely up for elimination. And she is. She's placed in the bottom 2 for the first episode. The judges tell her that her overacting is her main problem, in both look and acting. She's wearing like a lot of makeup this first episode, which of course when she's done, she's very upset, thinking that like she could go home just because of like how she looks, and that might ruin her chances. Episode 2, her main takeaway from the judging is that she needs to reduce her makeup, and one of the other contestants brings up like, oh, no mention of her overacting, which is probably the bigger problem. In the witch challenge, she goes a little kooky crazy with her costume, which Jamie says was a completely bizarre and weird choice. Her plan was to give like 100%, do something that makes her stand out. She plays this like vengeful ex-bride that's casting a spell, and it just does not really like come across well. The contestant Christine, remarks here that like, oh, so well, Sierra's separate choices were neat, but they didn't come together. During the acting class, where she's supposed to convey evil intent in limited words, he said that she sounds more like she's begging not to be killed rather than being the killer. In the episode 2 director's challenge, playing the evil murderous girlfriend, Tim remarks that he likes her changed look. This is when she reduced the makeup she was wearing and took that note from the judges. She tells us that she wants to be sexy in this scene, and of course the villainous editing of the show starts playing the raunchy porno music behind her. And then during the shooting of the scene, Tim gives her notes that this is too girly, there's not enough power, it feels like the high school version of the scene. Sierra ends up summoned for judgment in this episode. She's told that in her skills test, it was comedic in a bad way, but she made bad choices in that part. And then Tim said her scene was too high school, too giggly, and he's unsure if her bad habits can be broken. However, Sierra says she promises she'll fight for it, so she is safe for episode 2. In episode 3, with the skills test for the motion capture, she actually earns immunity. She wins. She does a really good job. Jamie specifically notes that when playing this puppet that's come to life, Sierra made the decision to, after coming to life, retreat back to the safety of the box the puppet came from, which was a really smart decision for that character. And it's in the interview, it's actually something that Tim and John Homa have kind of mentioned, specifically Tim. I remember Tim Sullivan. He had mentioned trying to get a lot of the contestants on the show to learn that hey, when you portray a character, even if it's mid-scene, something had just happened in the history of the character, the story of the character, you should use that in your acting. During the acting class for the Crying on Demand, Sierra was the first to go, and she ends up doing really well after learning how to do it, and she's the one that gets to give us kind of the confessional of this is what I learned today. And in the Director's Challenge for episode 3, Tim gives her some notes, but it does not seem like she takes them that well and listens that well to these notes. She's summoned for judgment in this episode. She ends up in the top 2. Jamie tells Sierra that she's super proud of her. John asks her to keep her confidence, and he's proud of her, and Tim says the shift between the emotions of the Director's Challenge was very, very believable. Sierra gets leading lady. Peak, episode for Sierra. She won the skills test, earning immunity, and then she won leading lady as well. Episode 4, she got a little overacty in the photo shoot with Debbie Rochon, and afterwards, Sierra is actually given a makeover to help her with her look. They chop off all her layers, they give her a fuck-ass bob, but she rocks it. Not much else for her in the episode, aside from that. Acting class moves past her pretty quickly, and so does the Director's Challenge. She just does pretty okay. In episode 5, with the campy zombie skills test, she's one of the ones that is moved past quickly. She does okay. She does get some more time to show her learning during the acting class. And then in the vampire trailer, this is where she starts to struggle again. She's supposed to play this nerdy, science-y character that's part of the vampire clan in the town that are, protecting themselves from the outlaws. And she played the nerdy character well. She actually did a really good job with the accent that they wanted her to give, this Wild West. But Tim was trying to give her notes on how to add layers to this character to make it more menacing and not just this one note, kind of nerdy, again, schoolgirl-esque character, but she's not taking those notes well. One of the other contestants is really noting here in her confessionals on the scene and on Sierra's performance that Sierra doesn't seem very versatile. She can only do one thing at a time. And also really only 1 or 2 characters. She's summoned for judgment in episode 5 for this. Ends up in the bottom 4 for that episode. I forgot to mention that when I was going over Sarah, that episode 5 actually just had a bottom 4. Everyone that was summoned was in the bottom. Her critiques, John says that everything is one note too often, and often that one note is silly. Tim said that she struggled to add layers to her character and just made a caricature. And Jamie conveys the same thing in her critique, saying that she needs more depth and she needs to learn subtlety to be able to add that. But she is ultimately safe in that episode. In episode 6, Sierra shares in the post-elimination debriefing her critiques for being too samey during her challenges. She doesn't do well in the skills test with the green screen. She does okay in the acting exercises with the fake props. And then for the final the Director's Challenge in that episode, she says she thinks the hardest part of the script will be the physicality, throwing her body around. This is the possession challenge, where they have to or be attacked by a ghost. Sorry. She's very, but she tells us she's confident. She's not very nervous. She's picturing herself really getting attacked by a demon or a ghost in the scene. However, all of the contestants are like giving her side-eye, questioning her acting, laughing. We even get a face from like a crew member after one of her shots is cut, and the crew member is giving like a whoa face to the camera. Tim gives her notes that she's not giving enough of like the build-up in the scene, and she really needs to learn that less is more, getting on the subtlety again. She's summoned for judgment in episode 6. I have a note here where she's like, I think I might get leading lady. I think I did a really good job. But I'm like, oh, so now she has the delusional edit. She's placed into the bottom 3 in that episode. In the director's challenge, Jamie believed Sarah's emotion, but the physicality that she was giving to this ghost attack scene was just bad. And it was. Like, everyone else is kind of doing realistic reactions to, like, if they were to be hit or dragged or something by a ghost, and she was just kind of, like, throwing herself all over the set. Tim said that when he was shooting it, he was fighting to hold back laughter from watching her. And while John recognizes her growth from the beginning, he's unsure if she's reached an upper limit onto how much she can learn in this time frame on the show and this experience. And she is ultimately axed in episode 6. Our next contestant is Ty. We learned in the first episode she's a working actress in Chicago. She is our villain for the season. Kind of, perhaps, undeservedly. She does call out things that are bad, and she'll share her opinion. But it's one of those things where it's like, you give the production, you give editing the perfect thing, and they will run with it. Give them an inch, they take a mile. So for the entire season, she's characterized as our villain. The first director's challenge, she does really well. She's summoned for judgment in the very first episode, and she's placed into the top 2. In the second episode, Ty does really well in the witchy skills test. She really brings her own character into it. She makes it comedic, but in a really good way. She curses the person she wants revenge on with split ends. She saddles them with a permanent fashion disaster, for example. In the I don't really have any notes for her in the acting class. Because we're early in the season, they're kind of focusing on the people who are doing really poorly most of the time. And she was kind of middle of the pack for that. Director's challenge, we really just get shown one take during that. She's summoned for judgment again in episode 2, and she ends up again in the top 2. So, pretty good streak so far. In episode 3, she's the first to go in the acting, the skills test, and we get to hear some of her acting decisions as narration over the performance. Again, this is not a lot of Ty in this episode. She does do a lot of narrating and commenting on the other contestants a lot of the time. That is how they kind of characterize her as the villain. But in terms of her performance and how she's doing, again, the show is let's spend more time focusing on the people doing horrible and the people doing really, really well. And she was middle of the pack again for episode 3. Episode 4, we're getting a bit more. In the sexy-ish photo shoot, she did okay. She played Bride of Frankenstein in that photo shoot, which they kind of edited it to make it seem she was struggling, but she did fine. In the acting class where they're trying to do this subtle seduction with John, there's a note that Ty didn't really give sexy, just gave scary. And she's telling us, she's I don't want to seduce John Homa. I'm afraid of that man. When the scripts are delivered for that episode, this is the director's challenge with the Python, and they're playing the sexy reptilian stripper lady. We learn that Ty is very, very afraid of snakes. So similar to Sarah with the maggots and Allison also with the maggots, we get Ty with the snakes. And we get a lot of she doesn't think she can deliver on this challenge, but she ends up doing well anyway. This episode is when we get the first fight. Ty gets characterized as the villain, and she gets characterized, her main enemy is Gabby, who we'll get to later. Gabby and Ty just thinks Gabby shouldn't be there. She thinks Gabby should have gone home much sooner, and she will let Gabby know. And Gabby tries to fight back and try to pull these why are you always after me all the time? It's a little bit when you watch it, it makes you not want to be on kind of either of their sides, but the show is kind of leaning towards giving Gabby more of a leg to stand on and defending her a bit more. Because from Gabby's perspective, Ty is just kind of coming after her, and all the times we see them fight and we see them argue, all that Ty is giving him is this is my opinion. If you don't want to hear it, then you should leave. So, it's a little, unbalanced from the show, which is what the show is supposed to do, right? So you're going to watch it. If this was an even fight that people were everyone gets to say their piece and then they all agreed, that's not what exciting. That's not what you watch for. So, but this is when it starts, this episode 4, and it kind of just continues until she leaves. In the director's challenge, though, Tim, she's a little too much at first. Tim gives her the notes that, hey, we've already made you look sexy. You don't have to, add another layer of that to play this seductive character. And, once she hears that, she gets it well. And she does act really well with the snake at the end. So it's one of those, hey, she did it. She overcame her challenges, her fear. Episode 5, in the zombie test, Ty is one of the ones that we actually get to hear her thought process behind the choices she's making. So the show is starting to characterize her as, talented and intellectual with her acting. She shares that she wants to go for campy, but she wants to add serious moments into it. And she wants to really, channel... what would a zombie be doing after it's freshly risen? It's hungry. So she really tried to portray, how do you make someone, seem hungry in your acting, especially when they're just a zombie. For all of this, she wins this challenge. However, we're halfway through the season, so by this point, there's no immunity. It's literally just, good job, you did it. In between events, between the first skills test and the acting class, this is the episode where Sarah was struggling to be away from her daughter, and at the end, Sarah goes home. Ty ends up becoming Sarah's kind of confidant. She's the one comforting and taking care of Sarah when she's kind of breaking down and helping her out. So we do get, even though she's being characterized as a villain, we do get to see her being protective and kind to other people in the house. She just doesn't like Gabby. Ty really gets to show off her skills in the acting class for that episode. And then in that episode, she also confronts contestant Christine, who was best friends with Gabby at this point. And Ty tries to really get into her head. It's hey, Christine, you need to spend more time honing your acting rather than protecting Gabby. And I'll get into Christine next because she is one of our final 3. Which is very interesting coming from Ty, because again, after she's saying, hey, Christine, you're spending too much time wasting on Gabby, you're not going to do well in this competition, you're not going to stick around, you're not going to win. But then Ty is doing the same thing to Sarah. So it's a very the editors knew what they were doing with that juxtaposition, and I thought it was very fun to see and pick up on. In the campy Vampire Outlaws trailer, Ty gets to play the leader of the vampire clan, but we really don't see her that much. There's one scene where she's kind of doing the end of the trailer where she's delivering a very badass moment. Tim gives her one note to make it less sexy and more scary and bold, and she takes the note really well, and we move on. So we don't really see much. She does in that trailer, Sarah was again the one that struggled, being her head dunked into the water multiple times, and they had to move on from the take without getting it as perfectly as they wanted. We get to see Ty comfort Sarah again. Ty is not summoned for judgment in this episode. This is the one with the bottom 4, but she does earn leading lady. It is just delivered through either the note or through the ones that were saved, and has to deliver it to later. Episode 6, after Sarah is eliminated, Ty is sad about Sarah going home. During our skills test for episode 6 with the green screen, Jessica here remarks that Ty is making some varying faces, and Ty doesn't really do well in the green screen challenge. Calls it overacting, which we're going to learn becomes a little bit of her problem as well. At this point, we're still really getting the Ty and the Gabby rivalry. When Gabby does the same screen test with the green screen, the skills test with the green screen, Ty starts to bring up Gabby's known issues at this point with blocking, which I'll get into later. During the test, Jamie gives notes to Ty that she was overacting, so it's coming back in. And she has to go a few times during the acting class exercise that episode because she's, again, overacting and making weird faces. This gets her really frustrated. And John starts to yell at her. Which is, they build that up. John, I can't tell if he's just a quick to anger or if he's just really good at playing that, tough love, tough teacher character. But the show definitely loves it. During the director's challenge in the 6th episode, she makes some interesting decisions and again ends up overacting. Tim says she's a little too frantic. She needs to calm down. This is the demonic ghost attack challenge. He says, like, her toss through the air was not that great. She does admit, like, the scene was harder than she thought it'd be. There's a full-on fight between Ty and Gabby after the Director's Challenges episode before Judgment. Full-on, like, shouting match here. We're full into the villain characterization here, especially since the show wants to put Gabby as kind of like a main character focal point, as we'll talk about in a bit. She's summoned for Judgment in this episode. She's placed into the bottom 3 along with Sierra, but Sierra is ultimately eliminated. Her critiques at the end of this episode were, like, not enough growth, too much overacting and gesturing, and John sees some, like, inherent strength, but her performances are just too low. But she is saved. Episode 7, skills test, when they have to be, like, possessed by this ghost character. The character Jamie gives them is, like, the tramp of the town who has a reputation, and most of the girls here, like, play into that for their character performance here. She decides to make the story, like, sad, like a girl who has a reputation that she does not deserve. Because of this, she ends up winning the skills test. Jamie likes the direction she took it in. Of course, by this point, though, there's no benefit for winning the skills test, just kind of recognition and praise. In acting class, where they have to pretend to be drunk, Ty really struggles here. John has her, like, take a few times of the drunk scene. She ends up struggling with this, going too comedic, too overacting. Again, following the same critiques from the previous episode. In the Director's Challenge for that episode, which is one where they have to play the psycho, like, villain character, like a Hannibal Lecter-esque character. She knows she can't go too big. She's going to get critiqued for overacting. But she also knows it's dangerous to not go big enough, and you get critiqued for being too one-note. So she's struggling here. She's feeling completely disconnected from the character. She doesn't know how to play it. She makes some really strange choices that the other contestants pick up on and call out. Tim doesn't like. She's not doing well. And she's really telling us this is not how she wants things to go. She's summoned for Judgment in the 7th episode, placed into the bottom 2. Jamie says she was great in a skills test, but there were only really awkward moments throughout her performance in the scene for the Director's Challenge. She says that it seems like you don't trust yourself. John says that there's moments where she reminds the audience, they're watching a performance. And Tim says her problem is that she's thinking just too much in the moment. And she was ultimately axed. So our 8th episode, final episode of the season, we're down to a top 3. Our top 3 end up being Christine Haberman, Jessica Ortiz, and Gabby West. For these 3, I'm just going to go through them, like, all 3 of them simultaneously. Just a reminder, episode 8, the first skills test is the Scream Queen's Gauntlet, an elaborately blocked scene that they have to do all in, like, one continuous take, or one continuous shot, and they only get, like, 3 takes to do it each. Interestingly they, like, blocked the scene out during the day. It's like at a park, like a public park. And they're, like, learning their, like, blocking and their marks during the daytime while there's just, like, other people around in the background. And then they come back later at night to shoot it. But to go back to the beginning for these 3, episode 1, we learn that Christina does children's birthday parties where she gets to act and play characters. But we don't really get much of her until the Director's Challenge, where, she has a first take, it's okay. She gets notes, she does a second take, it clicks for her. Jessica tells us that she studied acting for 2 years but hasn't had any really big roles. She's the first one to do the test. Jessica gets characterized as being really consistent and really good throughout the season. Whereas Christine, like, she does okay in the first part, and then she picks up speed in the middle. By the time we get to the top 3, it's one of those things where it's like, is it enough, right? Jessica's good, but it's one of those things where it's like, is she being challenged? And similar to Tanidra in season 1, when she finally does get challenged and has critiques, it doesn't go well. There's, like, a final, breakdown near the end that may ruin things for her. In the rest of episode 1, we do get a lot of Jessica. She is one of our focus characters, contestants for that episode. In the Director's Challenge, she takes Tim's notes really, really well, and she gets to share with us her acting choices, the show portraying her as, like, talented and intellectual. She gets a lot of, like, great, excellent comments from Tim. She's summoned for Judgment, episode 1, top 2. She wins leading lady. Gabby West. In our first episode, we learned that she's been acting in LA for a few years, but it's been really bad financially for her. She's had to move back to New Mexico, and she's hoping, Scream Queens 2 will really be a big break for her and really help her out. She does also really well in the first skills test with reacting to the Freddy actor, and she actually wins the first Scream test. Jamie calls her the front runner, and she earns immunity. A very important point here. because then in the director's challenge, she does horrible. Anxious energy. She can't take Tim's notes well at all. She struggles with like technical aspects. So she gets summoned for judgment. She has immunity, and all the judges tell her, like, if it wasn't for your immunity, your unprofessionalism and like how poorly you did in the director's challenge would have sent you home episode 1. Instead, they sent Lana home. In episode 2, in my notes here, there's actually just nothing for Jessica in episode 2. I know I saw her. I remember seeing her in the episode, but nothing like substantial or of note really happened with her in this episode. Christine ends up being the winner of the witch challenge. She loves witches and she makes some really good choices, and she does a really good job. She earns immunity. Jamie really liked the modern take she gave to the witch, and that it felt really real. However, her pacing in the director's challenge, her first take is a little too slow, the one for the killer girlfriend, but she does really well the second time. Gabby, in the witch acting test, she does okay. She struggles again with technical aspects, which is kind of a thing like the show is, editing her footage to really highlight. There's like a big cauldron and she struggles to actually like make it move and use it. And it breaks her focus. She does well in the acting class, specifically the exercise with Ty, who would later become her number 1 enemy. And in the director's challenge, Gabby really wanted to make her character likable but also dark and sultry. And Tim really likes this. She's summoned for judgment in episode 2, and Gabby's placed into the top 2 and earns leading lady for her performance in the director's challenge. Episode 3, Christine, Jessica, and Gabby are really in the background because this episode is focusing a lot on everyone doing poorly. That was in the bottom half. I have a note that I was like, did I even see Christine's performance in the director's challenge? I just don't remember. Jessica was the one that ended up with the maggots in her mouth during the director's challenge in this episode, but she does really, really well. And Gabby, she gets through it all. She still has like some technical problems. That's about it here. She notably during the motion capture skills test was like looking at the screen the whole time, because she was more interested in like how her movements matched the character's movements rather than just like acting and trusting it. Episode 4, during the photo shoot, Christine was confused a little bit, but she received some notes from Debbie and she did really well. Christine is the other recipient of one of the makeovers. She initially takes it really poorly. She's like, oh, don't cut off my hair. I don't want my hair. Again, love the America's Next Top Model. Someone always complains about their hair being cut off and like the makeover they're going to get. They don't even really cut it that much. They like give her some layers. They blow her out a bit, chop off the like split ends. She's good to go. Basically just the same, but fuller. During the director's challenge here, she did alright, but we were quickly moved past her in the editing. For Jessica, she stumbled a bit to be, sexy and scary in the photo shoot, but after being told some good notes from Debbie, she gets it really well. She struggles in the acting class to do sexy with John, but at the second attempt, she increases her confidence, and that's what John tells her to really latch on to sell seduction. She goes first in the director's challenge with the snake. She takes direction from the python to mimic its movements, so she's telling us how she is making her decisions. Tim directs her to be more playful. She takes this note well, and Jessica feels really good about his performance. She is summoned for judgment in episode 2, and she wins leading lady. Episode 4, sorry. Gabby does struggle a bit more in episode 4. She's really struggling with the beats of the scenes and the blocking in both the acting class, being sexy and seductive, and in the director's challenge, she's okay. she again, gets kind of caught up in everything that's going on in the scene. There is, of course, this is where the fights between her and Ty start. Gabby gets summoned for judgment in episode 4. She feels like she's confident. She's like, I'm not going home. Put in the bottom 2. Jamie says her challenge performance felt like it was meandering. John says the challenge was just outright horrible, and Tim at this point is saying she's too consistent. But they do keep her over Allison in that episode. Episode 5, Christine and Jessica were both moved past pretty quickly in the zombie skills test. Gabby gets shown some more time in the skills test because she spends way too much of it physically looking at the mark she's supposed to stand on. Jamie yells at her later for this and tells her that she counted the number of times Gabby looked at the ground where she was to go stand, and it was 8 times. Mostly this is because she's so freaked out about the explosives that were on here that she forgot to act and forgot to actually do the challenge well. Christine and Jessica do pretty okay. And they both all do well in the acting class. Although Gabby kept breaking character and laughing at herself, which John, really didn't like. In the Vampire Outlaws trailer, Christine is just called boring. She's supposed to be like a badass, and she just can't get there. She can't get badass enough, tough enough, or scary enough for her character. She's one of the outlaws with Sarah. Jessica does really well. She's supposed to play like a tough, badass character on the other side. She does well. They get to show her like shooting a gun. Gabby takes like notes really well in the Vampire Challenge. It's the first time we're really shown her like here she is in the scene. Here's what she's doing. She's getting notes from Tim, and she receives them, and she does extremely well. However, both Christine and Gabby end up in the bottom 4 in that episode. Of course, they are both saved. Episode 6 is the skills test with the green screen. Christine's performance in the skills test, Sierra thinks she's played it safe. Jessica, she's really like trying to bring in her imagination and put herself in the scene. Gabby ends up doing really well and makes a believable performance, and Gabby ends up being the winner of the skills test in that episode. In the acting class, they all do pretty okay. Gabby makes some weird initial choices, but she ends up doing well. Jessica struggles at first in the acting class, but she does eventually learn how to deal with the props and make them seem realistic. And Christine gets stuck making the props seem a little too realistic, but she does take John's notes, and she eventually figures it out. This episode is when Christine, it really kicks in for her that she, needs to start delivering or she's going to be going home. And she tells us this, and the other characters tell us this as well. In the Director's Challenge, Christine does an amazing job at selling that her body is really being tossed around and beat up by this demonic entity. Jessica does really, really well in this scene. She makes some amazing choices, and Gabby does pretty excellent as well. They all did really well in this Director's Challenge. Jessica ends up winning Leading Lady, although Christine is also summoned and is told she is safe. Episode 7, this is the one where they're supposed to do the skills test where they're possessed by the ghost with the trampy reputation. Christine, Jessica, and Gabby all play this way too sexually for both Jamie and for Ty's liking. They all kind of do it the same, and they all kind of get the same critiques there. Christine does pretty okay at playing drunk in the acting class. Jessica has a little bit of a breakdown here. Gabby tries to do the drunkenness thing. She doesn't do it well. John tells her to sit down. Jessica goes. Jessica does it well. Gabby asks for a second chance, and then basically does the same thing Jessica did. Then Jessica gets upset and has a little outburst, has a moment where she's demanding, she's like, how come they get a second chance? And how come when she gets a second chance and does the same thing that I did, she's praised? John gets onto her for this, and he's like, you know what? You did really well in this class, but now all I'm going to remember is you complaining and you throwing a little tantrum. Not looking good for Jessica in this moment. This is her breaking moment, like I mentioned with Tanidra in season 1, where Tanidra kind of did well through all of it, and then in episode 7 she finally got critiqued and she broke down. In the Director's Challenge, this is the one where they play Hannibal Lecter character. Tim is not the greatest fan of Christine's delivery as this character. It's too comedic, too campy. It's not sultry, scary, seductive enough for him. Jessica does it really, really well. At first she struggles because she wants to give the character an accent and she's focusing on that too much, but then she commits to it, and Tim actually really likes that she made this decision and committed to it and then pulled it out at the end. And then Gabby actually goes last in this challenge, and she kind of smokes everyone else. This is when Gabby is really racing to the front of the pack and showing her skills. Christine ends up in the bottom 2 in this episode, but she is saved. Ty is the one that got sent home. Everyone's summoned for judgment at this point because there's only 4 left. Gabby and Jessica are the top 2, and Gabby ends up winning Leading Lady for the 7th episode, heading into the final stretch. So just to recap real fast, by episode 8, Christine has 2 lows and 1 high. Jessica has 3 wins and 1 high, and Gabby has 3 lows and 2 wins, and lows being at risk of being eliminated. So by this point, Christine's up there, but she's not the best, and Jessica and Gabby are kind of neck and neck, where one of them has weaknesses, the other has strengths in that same domain, and vice versa. Episode 8, like I said, Scream Queen's Gauntlet. Christine is the one who is axed here. She, looks like too much of a victim. She struggles to really, get into the character and do the transition well, and sell to the audience that this is a character they want to root for. In comparison, even though Jessica and Gabby make mistakes, they just do a much better job acting, so they get to move on to the next stuff. The final acting class, Jessica and Gabby, John has them practice their roles, rehearse for their final scene, the homage from Saw 1. And it's okay. They go back and forth. John pushes both of them. They eventually finish up. John says his final words to them before they go and do their final challenge. They get to go to Lionsgate. They meet the head producer of the Saw franchise at the time. And then they do their final challenge, which is actually not with Tim Sullivan. Tim passes them off to Darren Boozman, who was at the time the director of Saw 2, 3, and 4. And as I found out later, he is also the director of Repo the Genetic Opera. And he, later on in the future, ends up being the director for Spiral, one of the later Saw films as well. So Darren is a different challenge for Jessica and Gabby because he doesn't direct in the same way Tim does. Darren tells them to start, he's like, I don't really like to give any initial direction. I like to just see what the actor is going to do and then go from there. So Jessica and Gabby have to do this scene in which, if you've seen Saw 1, it's like when Gordon, he's like chained up, he gets the call from his daughter and he learns that Jigsaw has not only kidnapped him, but he's put his wife and daughter in danger as well. And this causes Gordon to like snap. And he starts threatening the Jigsaw that is like not there, yelling at the camera and whatnot. So they have to do a very similar scene where they have to convey, this like urgency and this fear and wanting to get out of this situation. They're also like chained up to a pipe the same way that Dr. Gordon is in the Saw 1 movie. They both do well, they both have their own struggles. Gabby initially struggles to kind of like connect. She's a little bit too fast-paced. She's a little frantic. But she does get the notes. She does do well. Jessica, she hits her marks. She does what's asked of her. But she struggles a bit with like her own blocking and trying to convey an actual sense of like this character wanting to escape this imprisonment. Whereas Gabby really impressively goes and off the cuff, it seems, improvise, like, sells that she's trying to, like, break out of the set that she's on. They both do really well. Darren is impressed with both of them. In the final judgment, Jamie, she says the director's challenge was amazing. Jessica is stunning. She has a strength that really comes out on screen. John says that Jessica is fearless, but he's still bringing up that one slip in the class from the previous episode. But he does love her performances, and Tim says that Jessica has incredible range, and she nailed all the characters that were ever given to her. For Gabby, Jamie said she was amazing in the director's challenge, but then again, she's always been interesting to watch. She just needs to get those technicalities down. And she brought many unique performances, but also a share of mishaps. And she did bounce back from each weird hurdle. And the ultimate winner of Scream Queens Season 2 does end up being Gabby West. I struggled for quite a while to decide if I agreed with this, because I was kind of rooting for Jessica. I knew going into the Gabby won, just because it's this show's been out forever and I love the Saw franchise, so I knew who she was in Saw 3D. But it's one of those things where you look at the track records and it's Jessica has more wins. She was way more consistent. She had this weird personal slip up in episode 7, but I don't think that should have put her below. And I think I decided, I was going to be I don't agree with the judges. This is a horrible decision. But at the end of the day, and this is you see it online, and I think the producer from Lionsgate even mentions this in the end, because he gets to sit on the judging and also give critiques. He's the winner, we picked who was best for our franchise and our film. Which I do agree, Gabby is better for that. Jessica's a really good actress. But it's hard to tell if she would be good for, Saw specifically, as the character that they were going to put her as, which is just, a victim. I do think Jessica would do a really good job playing one of the police characters in the Saw franchise. I was gonna fight it. One thing I will say that I find interesting here is that, Gabby almost went home episode 1. Had she not had immunity, she would have been axed. And it's a very interesting, hypothetical case to consider. It's okay, what if she didn't have immunity? What if she had gone home episode 1? Who would it have followed the same path? Would it have just been Gabby and then Lana, Rosanna, Carly, Allison? I could see up for the first part that probably would proceed the same way. because Gabby was low in the first episode, she won in the second episode. Ty probably would have won that second episode challenge. And then Gabby was low in episode 4, so Allison would have just been delayed one more episode longer. Same with Sarah. So, you know, and at the end you would have had to come down to potentially Jessica and Christine, but I think had Ty been able to win in episode 2, it may have come down to Jessica and Ty. And if you put it for those two, I think it's a little even closer. I don't even know which one I would tell you would probably be the best. Probably for Saw, Ty. Again, Jessica's a great actress. And she's actually had an incredible career post Scream Queens. She might be the most successful one, aside from Rosanna. Rosanna, she actually has one of the most successful and popular cooking YouTube channels. She's Rosanna Pansino. You can look her up on YouTube. She's received 2 Shorty Awards in 2013 and 2018. She was nominated 5 different years for Streaming Awards across multiple categories. She did have some minor one-time acting roles, but now she's, like, on this YouTube cooking thing, and, like, she does amazing. I've even, like, seen some of her videos before and was a fan of them before I realized, like, oh, she did Scream Queens too? Like, what? She's even hosted her own reality competition show in 2001. It was called Baketopia. You can definitely currently watch her on YouTube at her channel, Rosanna Pansino. Jessica, now known as Jana Lee Ortiz, she went on to star in the police drama Rosewood from 2015 to 2017. She was in 44 episodes. Then she was also a side character in Grey's Anatomy, specifically a character that spun off into a lead role in a spin-off show, Station 19, where she was in 105 episodes between 2018 and 2024. Out of all the people who've done Scream Queens, I think that's the most successful, at least in, like, mainstream TV. I don't think she's done any films. Everyone else on, like, Scream Queens 1 did, like, short films afterwards, or, like, unknown horror films for Sarah from that season. But, like, that seems the most impressive. The only other ones that are notable that I could really, like, dig up a lot of stuff and felt like talking about mentioning, Carly, the one who was eliminated in episode 3, she goes on to appear in Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, Love and Hip Hop Hollywood, Love and Hip Hop New York, Saints and Sinners, and Black Ink Crew. So I am excited to cover all of those and see Carly later. And then Gabby, you know, she's the winner. She obviously went on to act in Saw 3D. Tanidra for winning Saw 1. You know, I talk a lot on my previous podcast about this. What do the winners get? What do people get from being on this show? The winners got a role in their Saw movie, and everyone gets exposure. But also, depending on how you're portrayed, this could be like a bad thing for you as well. Tanidra got a pretty good role in Saw 6. She had 2 scenes, one where she gets to act in a trap where she's a survivor, and another one where she's yelling at Detective Hoffman, who was taking place for Jigsaw at that moment in the franchise. She also got to come back for Saw 3D, where she had a bit of a cameo role, and she gets to give, like, another dramatic delivery and scene. But Gabby, by comparison, she is a victim in a trap, and she screams, and then she dies. She did an interview where she got to talk about the experience of, like, having a body cast made and having to do these, like, this scene. But, you know, compared to, like, what Tanidra got to do, it really wasn't that much. You know, and then after that, she acted in a few short films, and she had some one-off roles on TV, so, you know, props to her for winning Scream Queens 2 and getting to be in Saw 3D, but, you know, didn't do much career-wise in this as far as I could tell, going forward. So, what are all my thoughts? I will say, first of all, it just seems like Jamie King had so much more fun doing this show than Shawnee Smith ever did. And it could just be Shawnee's personality. But Jamie seemed like she was having a good time participating in the show. The budget definitely got amped up here. Or if it didn't, they definitely used their budget more creatively and more effectively. And you can tell in, like, the style. Everything in the house is nicer. They're doing a bit more wilder stuff. I don't know if the, like, contestants got paid anymore. I couldn't really find anything online about any of that, or how much John Homa, Jamie King, and Tim Sullivan were paid compared to the first season. But, like, everything in the house is much nicer, and everything's kind of more elevated to match that. I think I mentioned this earlier, but during judging and critiques, all of the contestants are dressed a lot nicer than they were in season 1. They're all in nice heels. They're all wearing dresses. They all have jewelry on. Where in season 1, you might get like a nice shirt and leggings, or jeans or something like that. They still look nice, but here it's elevated, and the show became elevated as it usually will in a season 2. Gabby did some post-show interviews in which she really praised the teaching skills of John Homa. I'll note here that in those interviews, though, she kind of talked a bit more. She's like, yeah, I did more classes with Homa later and learned more about, like, general acting, not just horror. And that's really what she was, like, kind of referencing when she says he's a really good teacher and a really good acting coach. Not necessarily specifically the stuff for this show. And I bring this up because I find it really interesting when a show like this incorporates a professional, who is very good at their craft and in their field, who is respected. But then, like, the reality TV creature gets a hold of them and tends to turn them into, like, a trope or an archetype or characterize them as a very particular note. Here, John Homa has 2, like, characteristics on this show. He's very tough on all the contestants, but he's also very paternal. You can tell that he, like, wants to respect them and wants them to do well, and he's, like, giving a tough love, but he does support them. And when he's proud of their growth and performance, he lets them know that. I find it interesting when, similar thing for, like, Tim Sullivan, and compared to James Gunn in the first season, like, they're good directors, and they're in the field, and how do you convince them to, like, be on a show like this, and then, how does the show use its reality TV magic to make them into something specific, right? All in all, it was a good second season, I thought. For reality TV standards, it really, really fit the bill with reality TV at the time, as did season 1. A lot of people online seem to not like this season. I enjoyed it, but I definitely enjoyed it for different reasons than I enjoyed season 1. Season 1, we had a bit of an underdog story from the start, just because Tanija didn't have any, like, concrete experience going in, and we felt pretty connected to a lot of the characters there. But in this season, the through lines that kind of happened were, they kind of relied on, like, the drama a bit more, especially once Ty and Gabby started having their regular arguments in each episode. That was what really was dragged throughout the season and brought forward. But if you watch season 1, I definitely would say, like, go ahead and watch season 2. See if you also like it, but also just to see how things changed. They never got a season 3. Yoke and Biagio definitely wanted a season 3, I think. In one of the interviews they did, they were asked, like, how should future hopeful contestants on the show, like, prepare for a season 3, and they were like, well, you should watch seasons 1 and 2, and that will help you prepare for the future season. And so it seemed like the way they answered that they wanted to do more and keep doing this. But after Saw 3D, Saw 7 / Saw the final chapter, there was a bit of a hiatus on Saw film stuff. Jigsaw, which would be the next one in the franchise, came out in 2017, whereas Saw 3D, the one that Gabby won the role in, came out in 2010. So, they didn't have another Saw film that they could attach to the series, and that kind of was the one that was representative, because it was Lionsgate who was, helping produce and fund this show in a way. So the series kind of died, and it definitely didn't come back. It's very interesting that this is, like, the only horror franchise to ever spawn, any kind of reality concept from it. In this case, a competition to be in the movie. There's so many out there, and you think eventually one of them would prop up something else, and take part of its world, its lore, and turn it into some kind of reality show, probably a competition. And I think it would be interesting to see that idea brought back in the future. Hopefully maybe VH1 can dig through the vaults and go, let's do this again, but let's do it for, the next A24 film or something. And maybe a part of this has to do with the fact that, and I talked about this a little bit in the podcast episode on season 1, that horror now is not the same as horror as it was then, which was not even the same as horror was 10, 20 years prior to it. We get a lot of, like, subtle and fringe horror now, and a lot of, like, oh, the scary monster is like just a regular guy, but he's got a dark secret. Yeah, Jigsaw was a regular guy, but he was doing outlandish things in the movies. Making people cut off their own arms, or rip out their tongues, etc. That was Scream Queen Season 2. I like it. I give it like a 3 out of 5. And if you like this episode, please feel free to share it with a friend, rate it on whichever podcast platform you prefer, interact with me on the same platforms, or on either of my social medias, which you can follow the pod on Instagram at The Recap Episode. All the episodes are also uploaded to YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod, where every now and then other special bonus content will show up there as well. Until next time, I'm going to go make my own pitch for my own horror-themed reality show.